Okay, folks, here we go with the UK Scottish House Price Index. So it's the UK house prices, but it's the Scottish one we're going to rely on as well. And also the Fife property market in terms of the house prices for March 2023. Now, this is the true information. This is the information that really counts, to put it that way. Give me a second while I'll put Instagram live. This is the information that really counts. Because this is all the statistics together with all the information that's fed in by all the solicitors over all the different platforms to the land registry. They then collate all that information, put it all together, hence the reason why we're coming up to the end of May, and this is just up to the end of March, because they need to make sure all the information's collated and in fact, and the majority is actually in before they can actually put these details through. Hence the reason why it's a couple of months back. But there's quite interesting statistics here, and I'll talk about house price rises. House price rises. But for now, let's go on with the headline statistics and see what they're saying. Okay, so here we are right here. So as it stands, the average price in property in Scotland is 184,877. You can see that on the screen there. We have also got an annual price change over the last 12 months in Scotland of 3%, and a monthly price change of the property in Scotland was 0.7%. That's monthly. That's going up, by the way. 0.7. That's no minus. So that's going up. So property prices are actually going up. We're going to do a show on this next week. We're going to talk about how Fife house prices have actually risen by 7.18% since Christmas. And these statistics don't know it yet, but that's what's coming. And I'm going to talk about that with Richard next week, because it affects the rental market and property investors, as well as property sales and property buyers. But put that aside just now. So this is the headline stats. The economic statement from them is the average house price in Scotland increased by 3% to the 12 months to March 2023. This was up from 2.8% the 12 months to February 2023, and was slower than the average UK house price inflation of 4.1% in the 12 months to March 2023. On a seasonally adjusted, a non-seasonally adjusted basis, that's in other words, non-seasonally adjusted means it's raw data. It is just in the moment, it's collated together and it's dumped. Seasonally adjusted takes into account and it removes all the swings. It could cause a problem, like one-offs. It could hit the property market to give you a stabilization. So we're comparing apples with apples rather than apples with pears. Hopefully everybody still gets that at primary school and school level, because that's how I was taught. Don't compare apples with pears, compare apples with apples. What apples and pears had to do with money, I do not know, and house prices. But it works, and everybody understands it. So that's non-seasonal adjusted basis. Average house price in Scotland increased by 0.7% to from February 23 to March 2023, compared with an increase of 0.6% during the same period 12 months ago. So actually, house prices are actually increasing a lot more. Well, 0.1% more than they were actually 12 months ago at the same time. On a seasonal adjusted basis, average house prices in Scotland, they actually said, see, this is the seasonal adjusted. The seasonally adjusted underlying figures with the seasonal adjusted taking out, with them, that bit taking out of it, is at minus 0.1%. That's neither here nor there, really. So that really says it's quite stabilised, the market. Okay, comparing the January volume against the provisional volume estimate for January 2023. So the January 2022 volume, the volume transactions decreased by 19.4% in Scotland and increased by 9.3% in the UK, which means the number of properties actually being sold year on year is 19.4% down on the previous year in Scotland. But interestingly enough, it's actually increased by 9.3% overall in the UK. Wow. I mean, the UK, when you think about it, in England, because that's the boat one with England, and when you look at their market, it's actually increased quite dramatically in order to have that increase in 9.3%, which means the house prices in England are actually still continuing to go up. The volume of transactions and people buying are still continuing to go up as well. So that's surprising, considering that the English market is a higher price point than the Scottish market. It'll be interesting to see how that pans out over the next couple of months, and what that actually means. And I'll be able to give some sort of indication in the next couple of months what that data actually suggests to us. For now, let's focus on Scotland. In Scotland, detached houses actually showed the highest annual percentage change out of all property types, increasing by 4.9% in the 12 months to March 2023 to £340,000. Flats and maisonettes, apartments showed the lowest annual percentage change, which increased by 1.7% in the 12 months to March 2023 to an average of 125,000. The highest annual percentage change was actually in East Lothian. Point that way, actually, it's behind me, East Lothian, where the average prices increased by 8.6%, and in the 12 months to 2023 March to 317,000, and the lowest annual percentage change was the city of Aberdeen, where average house prices decreased by 6.9% in the 12 months to March 2023 to 132,000. Still, the ramifications of the fallout of the oil, the condensation of the oil market in terms of jobs and that, and consolidation, that's the word I was looking for. The consolidation of the jobs market suggests to me that it is still taking its toll in Aberdeen by property prices actually continue to drop in price. As with other indicators, the housing market, which typically fluctuates from month to month, it's important to remember not to put too much weight on 1 month's data and set of house prices, hence the reason why I talk about that quite a lot. Let's talk about the price change. We've got a wee graph here for the price change, and I'll change that over. Hopefully you can all see that. This is the annual price change in Scotland over the last 5 years. So you can see there, 5 years ago, it was sitting at around about just under 4%. And then it came down, and then came into lockdown, went down to zero basically, and then boom, there's all the boom time it came along. To be honest, my assessment of this boom in here and what was happening here is I remember actually saying back here in March 2019 or maybe 2018, I remember actually looking at the average salary to the average house price in Fife especially, and coming to the conclusion it's actually quite low in terms of that, and we're due for some sort of price alignment or price correction later on, and hence, in hindsight, it's a great thing that actually happened here, and with this big huge spike it came along in the boom in the market. I didn't actually think it would go up that much in terms of all of a sudden, all at once. But you can see how that happens. It happened with the housing market. It's happened with inflation. It'll potentially happen with base rates as well. So there seems to be a sort of, everybody thinks everything's fine for a short period, for maybe a medium to long term of time. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, it just booms. Whether it's actually inflation going up, whether it's interest rates going up, or whether it's the housing market going up. It's a lot to do though with the money supply going into the system. If you put more money into a system, therefore there's more spending availability. Therefore, there's still the same amount of goods. Therefore, the prices will probably go up to actually take that into account. Therefore, inflation goes up. Therefore, people need more money to live because their circumstances and their lifestyle is actually going up to suit that as well, and therefore they need more money again, and then they spend more and inflation goes up, then they need more money again. So it's a self-defeating spiral. It goes up or down depending how you want to look at it, and that's why some think tanks are out there, and especially the governor of the Bank of England, saying maybe households should actually consider restricting their spending to a degree to curb inflation, so they can keep base rates down, because they'll just keep putting base rates up until inflation's curbed, until it's under control. Luckily, inflation has come in 8.7%, down from the 10.1%, which is actually quite a dramatic drop in terms of inflation. Good signs on the horizon. But if you look at the underlying figures, things like the services industry and the manufacturing industry, you actually find inflation is not dropped as much as what inflation overall has dropped in terms of food prices and energy prices. So therefore, there is a likelihood at the Bank of England has actually signalled they'll probably do another quarter point base rate rise next month as well. If you are looking at the point or the prospect that you're coming out of a fixed rate mortgage from a really low rate, and you're going to go into a higher rate just now, and you might not be able to afford that, you need to speak to your bank right now. You need to speak to your mortgage broker right now in order to tell them and discuss with them what your options are. You do not leave it till the last minute. They do not like that at all, and it also puts you under pressure. The writing's on the wall. You may as well face the fury. Just get on with it. Just discuss it, and you'll be first in line to get some sort of help or support from your bank. So I definitely think that should be the case. If you are in a position where your mortgage rate is actually fixed rates coming up this year, 1.3 million household owners in the whole of the UK are coming out of fixed rate mortgages this year. So there's obviously people in Fife as well will do that, and therefore, and I've actually spoken to some of them, and therefore they're in a position either to negotiate with the bank right now to get a better rate right now before it comes out in 6 months' time, before interest rates continue to go up, or they will sell their house. It's one or the other. And to be honest with me, I would say negotiate a better rate right now so you can continue to stay in your house and have stability, and not need to do the entry and exit costs of selling and buying, and also not need to upheave yourself and go and have to move to a smaller property or a more affordable property, when you can actually negotiate with your bank right now and probably get a better deal for your mortgage, which will allow you to sustain and stay in your property. Anyway, I digress. So let's jump back to there. What does it say about annual price changes? Let's have a wee look. Annual price changes, you could see there in the 5 months, as I said, as it's gone up, and that boom, and it's come back down, and then it started to go back up again. See that from the beginning of the year, start to go back up. That's why it says it's on its way up again to a degree. I don't think you'll see the dizzy heights of where we've been before. Here's the annual price change per local authority. That shows Fife. So here's Fife here. You can see it right there. Fife. Average price in Fife, 168,224. Just get the calculator out. 168,224 divided by 33, which is average salary, supposed to be in Fife. It's about 5 times salary. That's a really good price point. If you go anything over 6 times salary, that suggests the market's overheating, or it'll start to overheat. So actually 5 times average salary in Fife is a good position to be in terms of price point. Hence the reason why I think prices will still continue to go up ever so gradually over the year now. Now I've got more information and data and facts. There was a talk at the beginning of the year that everybody said, oh, prices are definitely going to drop. And it's like, well, okay, I say between 5 and 10% as well. However, by the data it keeps coming out, it keeps suggesting to me that the market is going to continue to be quite stable, if not actually continue just to move up ever so gradually. So you never know, by the end of the year might actually have an increase year on year, rather than actually any 5 or 10% decrease. But you can see that because the Bank of England and the economic think tanks and even the government themselves have said, well, the recession that we thought was going to be here never appeared. The inflation that we thought would be under control actually went out of control. And the base rates where we thought would be historically low and would keep low actually have to continue to go up. So my point is, do they actually know what they're talking about? Maybe not. Maybe not. So, okay. So there's Fife, 2.1% overall year-on-year increase. There's other areas as well. Edinburgh is quite an interesting one. 324,000 average price point in Edinburgh, 163,000 average price point in Glasgow. Glasgow is extremely affordable. That's probably due to a lot of social housing on the periphery of it as well, the periphery of Glasgow itself. You have Aberdeen, sorry, it's actually gone down. Dundee, 141,000 to buy in Dundee. It's still gone up in value. The biggest place I would have said was probably the city of Edinburgh, it looks like, yeah. And then into East Lothian as well. It's 316,000. And you can see for yourself across there. I'll scroll down there in case anybody's wanting to see their own area in here for themselves. Overall, if you can see yours. And that's it. Low numbers of sales transactions in some local authority areas, such as Orkney, for example, and the Shetland Islands, can lead to volatility in this series as well. While there are extra efforts to account for the volatility and the change in the local prices, and the levels influenced because it's low levels. So in other words, the average price in an area is determined by the number of properties sold. Now in Fife, we're selling round about, everybody's selling around about 600 a month or 500 a month. So therefore, the average price is probably going to stay the same most of the time. But if you get to Shetland and the Orkney Islands, there's only 3 or 4 properties sold. So in 1 month, you have 3 or 4 properties sold at 200,000, and the next month you've got 3 or 4 properties sold at 600,000. The average price point is going to go from 200 to 600 in 1 month, and that's why they adjust to reflect these, to smooth that out, because they know that's unrealistic and that doesn't make sense at all. So they have adjustments that they put in place in order to smooth that out, so it doesn't look like a panic or a situation overall. Because you could easily think, oh my God, the prices in Orkney and Shetland are going up like they're going out of fashion. In actual fact, the next month it could be another 4 properties sold at 200,000 again. So they're back down to where they were. So they adjust them for that reason. Hopefully that makes sense. If anybody wants any clarity on that, please feel free to message me and I'll explain, maybe in a detailed post later on. Let's look at the house prices by region on a map. This is actually quite good because it shows, the average house prices. The red is 230,000 or greater, and as it goes less of red into the mauve. Is that mauve? I'm not really sure. Yellowy beige colour, and then into the blue and then to the strong blue. That's where it goes, the higher price to lower price. But you can see right across Scotland, where the average midpoint price is here. That's Fife. Fife is now. I'm at pains to say that Fife is maybe the average price area, and it's the average area for prices. But Fife is certainly not average. I could vouch for that, because it's like God's country here, especially today. The sun is out, it's shining, glorious, sandy, golden sandy beaches, and blue water and blue skies, and fantastic fresh air in Fife. What more could you ask for? Well, there is lots more, and it is a case of welcome God's country. Just over the water there, you've got also Dundee is very, very affordable. You can see that on that map there as well. So they're all very affordable areas. And then you get into the Highlands and Islands, and you get into Perth, which is really, high price point in the Perth area, high price point across the water in the Edinburgh area, and then into East Lothian area as well. So high price points overall. So you can see that there, mainly in the cities in there. And Glasgow's here as well, down there, the city centre of Glasgow. And then the periphery of Glasgow is actually quite low in value, hence the reason that overall it brings down the price point on average in that area itself. And then Dumfries and Galloway down the bottom, mid-price point as well, so very, very affordable. Overall, good news. To live in most of Scotland, it's very, very affordable. So let's look at average price, average change in terms of property type. Have we got numbers here, or they'll come later on? Just looking at that now. Yep. So sales volumes later on. We'll jump onto the average by property type. This is quite interesting, actually. So have you ever wondered what the average price is and why it's 184,000 on average? Well, this is how it's split down. So the 184,000 at the bottom there. But flats and maisonettes, about 125,000. Terraced houses, 155. Semi-detached properties, 199. And detached, 339, if not 340,000, to be honest. You can see the biggest jump is detached and semi-detached. Again, I think it's because they're very affordable, and a lot of people would rather have a semi-detached or a detached rather than actually go for a terraced or a flat. That's just a fact. If you can afford it, well, you would probably go for it. And I think that's where it is, because they're still very affordable in comparison when you look to England as well. So that's why I think they're at that. Sales volumes, let's look at that. This is actually quite interesting. We'll scroll down sales volumes. So what does sales volumes represent? Let me talk about this. Just take a quick drink. Sales volumes. the health of a property market is not really determined by the value of the property, the house, the price point, the average price point. Because if you have an average price point of 200,000, if you have an average price point of 180,000, it's not really that significant in the scope of things. And it doesn't have any bearing on your ability to borrow, because you'll still be able to borrow because it's based on something else. But what does matter is the number of properties actually sold in an area to keep it consistent. And let me give you an example. Well, actually, let's talk about this, and then I'll talk about that in a minute. The amount of time between the sale of a property and the registration of this information is the 2 weeks and 2 months, but it can be longer. Volume figures in this scenario in here, like I'm showing you, this one, these volume figures here, are they're reliable to a degree, and they're reliable for reporting, but they will change ever so slightly over the next 6 months as more data and more information comes in. They just show them the now, hence the reason why they're up to January 2023. This is what we're going to talk about next week, because a lot of these volume numbers are historical. And can you see how we've got January, February, March, April, May? We're almost at the end of May, and this is 4 months before. And it's because when you look back as well, most of these transactions that are actually recorded in the volume will be 6 months before that. So this data is based on prices of property, which was almost about 10 months ago, and just in the run up to it. So this is 10 months information, which is now getting registered, which potentially could be, well, it will be out of date, because we've got the current information, and the current information shows us since Christmas that prices have actually increased in the last, since Christmas, have risen in Fife by 7.18%. So it just shows you, and I'll talk about that next week on our show with Richard. So it's actually quite important to look at these numbers, and see, you can see there, 282 were sold in Aberdeenshire last year, 233 this year, 154 last year, Angus 89. That's actually that's no great, because when you look at that, if somebody's spending, say 154 properties are actually sold, let's take Fife. There's 488 sold in Fife last year. So every person maybe spends £15,000 on just upgrading their house. On average, let's just say on average, because some people spend more, some people spend less. So that means there's £7.3 million spent on property renovations in that month, from 488 people that buy property at 15,000 each with the local economy. So £7.3 million is actually injected in the local economy, with people spending for refurbishments and improvement for their house. Now look at it here now, 427 times the 15,000 is 6.4. So 6.4, 7.3 minus the 6.4 is £900,000 less. So if it was all equal, that means this year for the same thing, there'd be £900,000 less spent on improvements and refurbishments for your properties. Therefore, local contractors, local businesses are down in that month by £900,000 in turnover, in sales. That's bound to have a knock-on effect to them. Therefore, then they have to think, how can we cut costs? This is why you don't want the volume month to month to be, in comparison, to be any different from the year before. We're not really bothered about property prices. If property prices, go up and down and all the rest of it, it's fine. It's okay. It's neither here nor there. But the volume, if it drops dramatically, can make a huge difference to the local economy, because less people are actually spending on improvements and new kitchens and new bathrooms with local contractors. Therefore, they have to contract their costs in their business. Therefore, it knocks onto their suppliers and their employees as well, because then they turn around and say, well, I was meant to fit the same as what I did last year in terms of the number of bathrooms and kitchens, but because there's less people spending in their houses on fitting bathrooms and kitchens, I'm going to have to get rid of somebody and lay somebody off, because I can't afford to keep you on, because I've got no work for you. That's why the transactional value, in other words, the transactional volume of properties, is actually the most important statistic to actually focus on for the health of the property market. And that's why when you go from 488 to 427, an average spend of £15,000 on every single house that gets refurbishments improvements, we're actually dropping by £900,000 in the local economy. And that could have a hit on local businesses. Any local business person out there will understand that, and they'll know, because it will have affected them, especially if they're in this industry. But you can see there's some huge swings there. If we go down and look through, there's Perth and Kinross, 228 versus 157. So 228 minus 157, 71 down on the year before, times 15,000 equals, that's £1 million. That's £1 million worth of business, potentially. It's been lost because people aren't buying enough houses or moving into enough houses. So that's the fundamental difference. But overall, see in Scotland here, down the bottom, 7326 is the total volume sold last year at this time, compared against this year is 1,535 down. Multiplied by 15,000 is wow, £23 million down in terms of potential revenue. It could have been flown into local businesses and local retail shops. So that's why this number, the volume, is the most important indicator overall. But saying that, the health of the Fife property market is still pretty good. We're over 400 a month. And every other month's been very, very good in terms of transactional numbers as well. We can only wait to see what happens next month for the February period, and compare it with the previous year before, and see how we get on. So hopefully, I know I've laboured that a wee bit to death, but it's a really important statistic. It's probably the key statistic in the Fife property market to understand, or any housing market, is the number of properties actually sold and completed in the month compared to the previous year. And you want it really, this is why you want it really to be the same all the time. We're not bothered about house prices, but if we can get that the same all the time, the transaction numbers, then it keeps everybody in a job, because the same amount of resources are needed this year as it was last year. And that's what keeps everybody going. Okay. Let's pop on to the sales volumes in Scotland over the past 5 years. This is another one, transactional volumes, as I said. So how's the Scottish housing market doing overall over the last 5 years? Well, 6,654 were sold in the each month in the last 5 years. In January 2019, 7,000 in 2020, 7,700 in 2021, 7,300 in 2022, and 5,791. Now, 6,654 minus 5,791 is 863 down. So we're about 12 million down in revenue in terms of potentially what can go to contractors. But it's about 1,000 down, near enough, since January 2019 compared to January 2023. And again, before, as I said, you want these transaction numbers to be a bit higher. Let's see what happens next month. I think that's the most important thing that could come out of that. And then see how these numbers potentially will be different or the same, or what they'll be like overall. So sales volumes, transaction volumes, and that was important. Let's look at the new build. This is quite an interesting one. Now, this is the difference between new builds and a resale, which is, in other words, if you buy a house that's been built and it's been there for years and years and years, that's an existing resold property. Most estates call them resales, or they do call them that abroad. The new builds are obviously built from scratch. Campion Homes, Hedon Developments, Lomond Group, Persimmon, they're all building right now. Barrett, Wimpey, all the rest of it. You name it, they're building it. So this is the difference in price. Look at the difference between a new build. A new build, on average, costs £288,000. An existing property to buy is £179,000. 288 minus 179. There's a differential there, 109,000 between an existing property to buy and a new build to buy. Why is that? It's because the building standards and regulations insist that there has to be a higher insulation and higher quality and higher improvements on new build properties than there was on existing properties that were built before. Hence the reason why that 109,000 is in there, because it has to account for all the extra money and extra effort it has to go in to upgrade it in comparison to what an existing property built was at that time. The building standards at that time were a lot less stringent. Therefore, that's why they got away with less of a cost. So as we get more and more determined to get to net zero, as the government tries to get more and more to net zero and insists that we keep putting more and more carbon neutral improvements on our houses, which cost a fortune to do, like solar panels, for example, like ground source heat pumps, like really high value, high quality insulation, and maybe new types of heating systems, maybe new things that we've never even heard before. All these things cost a huge amount of money, hence the reason why that puts all the prices up at the new build properties. Hopefully that then makes sense about why there's a differential between the two price points between an existing property and a new build. Buyer status is quite a good one. First-time buyers on average in Scotland are buying at £147,309 just now. Formerly owner-occupiers are buying at £224,663. Why is that? Well, first-time buyers, it's their first start out. They're not hedged. In other words, they're not protected because they don't have a house already. So they're starting from scratch. They're having to buy into the market, where former owner-occupiers have already bought into the market, and they've been stabilised by the fact that they've got a house already, and that house goes up or down in value in comparison to the other house they're about to buy next. And that's what keeps them on the same level. So in other words, if your house went up but you stayed in by 10%, the house that you're about to buy will probably go up by 10% as well. So there's no great differential except the difference between what you're buying and what you're selling and the 10% extra on top of that. Whereas if a first-time buyer comes along and tries to buy a house and all of a sudden it goes up by 10%, they have to pay the full 10% on that. They don't have anything to hedge themselves against that because they don't have a house. It goes up in that value at the same time. That's why former owner-occupiers have a huge amount of equity built into their houses if they've been in there for a number of years, and that allows them to buy a bigger property at a higher value. Hence the reason why there's 147 for a first-time buyer and it's 224 for a former owner-occupier. Cash and mortgage, who's using what and who's buying what. Cash buyer, they're generally paying £167,803 for a property in March 2023. And somebody with a mortgage generally pays a bit more. They pay £192,998, which is £183,000. Why is that? Because cash buyers tend to not be in a position to what we call leverage or multiply their buying power. So they tend to be buying a lot lower. Plus the fact most cash buyers are actually cash buyers because they don't want a mortgage anymore. So they tend to start to downsize from a bigger property to let themselves be mortgage free because they don't want to take that hit or that risk of mortgage interest rates going up and being left with a debt. So they want rid of it. So they tend to buy lower value, or a lower price point, sorry, not lower value. So that's why mortgage is generally a lot higher. Hopefully that's given you all the information you need to know about the house prices in Scotland and where we're going, and how important it is that we keep the transactional level of property sales at the same stabilised level as it was the year before, and how important and how less important it is that house prices are the key indicator here. So when you see anything, just as a summary, when you see anything in the media that talks about house prices dropping, the first thing you should think to yourself then is, yeah, okay, but what's the transactional volume? How many houses were sold as opposed to that price point? And what is it compared to in comparison to the year before? And if it's like for like, you shouldn't be worrying about the house price dropping. It doesn't make any difference. Because most people stay in their houses for up to about 6 or 7 years. About 50% of people do. And about 50% of people actually move after 7 years. But they tend to stay a lot longer. It used to be about 15. I've been in my house for about 18 years. So it makes no difference. Classic example for me is when I bought my house, the credit crunch hit. It was 360,000. It dropped to 300,000 straight away. But it's not made any difference to me because I'm still in the house. So that drop in 60,000 has never materialised because I never sold the house. The house is worth 450,000 now. So it makes no difference, but it's hedged me against the next house I'm going to buy. And if I downsize, it's a better improvement because I'm downsizing to a price at a comparative level, but I'm paying a lesser value. Therefore, I'm actually saving more money. Therefore, it's better for me. And it then makes you mortgage free. Okay, that's me wrapped up there. Any other questions on here, please feel free to ask them later on. And until next time, guys, I'm Jim Parker for Fife Properties TV.